Monday, May 1st, 2023. We're going to call this meeting to order. Time is 6 o'clock. Approval of the agenda. I got the motion that the agenda for the council meeting on May 1st, 2023 be approved as presented. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Young and Councillor Lockett. Any discussion? All in favor? No. Item 3 is declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest tonight? None. We don't have any presentations or delegations tonight. The next part is approval of the council minutes. The motion is that the council minutes dated April 17, 2023 be accepted as presented. Can I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Burton, Deputy Mayor Campbell, thank you. Any discussion on the minutes? All in favor? Thank you. 7 is communications and petitions. There are no items under this today. 8 is consent reports. Are there any items in the information package that anyone would like to take out of the consent report? Councillor McConnell?
Thank you, Mayor Shankar. There's 2 that I'd like us to take a look at. I have a question in regards to the first one, though. May just not be understanding it correctly. It's number 5, the City of Stratford's resolution regarding the support, the use of long-term care funding to support, that should read community care services, not communication. The way I understand this when I read it is that they're requesting that money that the province would normally give towards a bed in a long-term care home, if that bed is not being utilized, or if the home is under renovation and the beds aren't, that they just don't get that money. The way I understand this is that the municipality would like that money to still come to the municipality to be used for home care for people. Now, through you, I'm not sure, Matthew, or who on staff could clarify that. Am I understanding that correct?
I believe so. So you're exactly correct that beds in abeyance, when they either are closed due for a certain, maybe it's an outbreak, things like that, or it could be redevelopment, then the ministry keeps that funding. And I think what they're suggesting here is not necessarily home care, but community-based services that keep residents in their home. Sometimes there's a distinction between the two. And if I'm reading this, then it's kind of that community care services. So it's organizations like CPHC, the Alzheimer's Society, things like that, that provide those complementary services to keep people in their home. Thank you.
That's what I thought. So my thought here is, if these beds are not being utilized because of whatever reason, then there's probably, well, there's a waiting list in everybody's community to get into these beds. So presumably it's costing the municipalities in social services to support these people in their homes or in the hospital until they can get there. So I think that I agree with this resolution that that money should still be coming to the community to support those people until they're able to get into their homes. So I think we should support this motion. So I would like that one removed. The second one is the municipality of Shania resolution in support of the Enbridge third-party charges for utility locates. And that is something that does, I believe, involve us. And if the utilities start charging $200 for a locate, if it's us that wants to locate, that does affect our tax base, and I believe we should be protesting that along with everybody else.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councillor.
Yes, through you, Mayor Shankar. I have the same 2 as Councillor McConnell, but I have, this is a big one actually. So I have the municipalities. Let me get this one right here. I think it is just lost it here, the Federation of Northern Ontario Municipalities, and it's concerning Bill 75, and it sounds like to me this kind of comes into play with repeat offenders that we continue to see in our region and just in the whole region as a whole, and it's the designation of a chronic persistent offender. It's also allowing community impact statements at bail and bail hearings, and then it's creating the reverse onus in bail in all firearm offenses. So that's one that I feel like if you read the local paper, it's pretty consistent. If you're on Facebook, it's pretty consistent. That one I'd like to pull out. And the last one was Waterloo, where in this one here, it was City Waterloo. It's for donors that donate more than $100. Currently, we all know this, that you have to share their name and then personal home address, right? And I'll be honest, even as a counselor, when I ran, I had to share my home address and it was published to the public. Kind of felt awkward, you know, but for $100 donor to have to publish their address, it feels like just reading some of it, people have been targeted, and then it also prevents people from wanting to donate to these kind of things because of the lack of freedom of privacy. So,
Are there any left?
I think there's one.
Anyone else on that last one?
I'm glad Councillor McConnell brought up the 2, so I didn't have to bring up 4. So thank you, McConnell.
Okay, so we'll take those out and then we'll accept it as amended.
Yep.
So the motion is all items on our consent report section of the agenda be accepted as amended. Can I get a mover and seconder? Oh, you and McConnell and Kirkby, sounds good. All in favor? Thank you.
Recommendation, given the fact that we have 4 or 5 pulled out of here, I don't think any of them are an emergency case, so we don't need them all on the same meeting. If it's a big meeting, they can be chucked in a couple at a time.
You can let Matthew,
Yeah.
Lindsay figure it out, but thank you. I got no committee reports tonight. I'm gonna pass on mayor's speech tonight and we'll go to outside boards, committees and commissions. Start with Councillor Burton on the PAC committee.
Thank you. Both Councillor Young and I were both at the meeting, and it was open to the public. The whole process of the meeting was to go over the new items that were put into the CIP program. Dana did an amazing job, as you see in your package tonight, full of information, lots of great changes to the CIP program. And she also went out and talked to the people that have applied for the program before to see what was working and what wasn't working. So to get their feedback too, which is, in my opinion, was really good. But overall, it was a very good meeting, and we were happy with the results of the program, all the amendments.
Thank you. Did you have anything to add to that, Councillor Young?
No, I think Councillor Burton captured it all. Just another thank you to Dana for her report. It was really, really comprehensive.
Great. I've got Deputy Mayor Campbell for the Fire Services Committee, and can you also give us an update on Good Roads?
Yeah, great. So I attended the fire administrative meeting on Tuesday, April 4th. Volunteer firemen are continuing to upgrade their training to meet the provincial standards. They have been doing hazmat training and water training last month, April. As well, they attend their regular training on a monthly basis. And they, as you know, new businesses keep opening. We cut another ribbon today. So they have been inspecting new businesses that have been opening in Prescott to ensure everything is up to code and to determine how they can gain access in case of that. And then I had the good fortune to attend the Good Roads Conference, April 16th to 19th in Toronto. It was introduced by Indigenous elders and a smudging ceremony, which was really great. It was really thoughtful and I really liked it. Anyway, the keynote was Brent Todderan of Todderan Urban Works, and he has worked on effective change in cities. He said streets are meant for people to linger and live and not just move through. And roads are for single purpose movement of cars. So you've got streets, you want people to linger, roads you can just move through. He called them sticky streets for people, so to not allow fast traffic to come through town nonstop. And suggested planting trees, provide more sight lines to slow drivers down. So if you plant trees downtown. I'm not sure where this is, if it is in our strategic plan, but he said you need to plan for streets in the vision and planning section of your strategic plan and not just in the budget section. He said paint is not infrastructure. You can paint bike lanes and pedestrian crossings, etc., but you need to develop a culture of respecting people on your streets. It's not just the paint. Ken Beer of Safe System Solutions talked about inherent risk and road safety audits. He said in no other industry would it be acceptable to have such high rates of death and serious injury. Ontario will soon be releasing its road safety audit guidelines to encourage pragmatic, practical approaches to road safety. And this one's so cool, this next one. So the city of Brantford has come up with a climate change initiative. They call it a climate lens tool for council decisions. So any matter coming before their council must quantify and report its impact on its carbon reduction strategy. So for example, if they wanted to cut down 45 trees to make a parking lot, then they would have to figure out through this calculator tool, they would find out that it would increase 1 ton of CO2 for this, for cutting down the trees. They would then have to figure out how to reduce that carbon footprint in other ways, such as replacing the trees elsewhere or other means to reduce their carbon footprint. And in all written reports to council, you know, with all our reports, it says financial implications. They have also a category that says climate and environmental implications. So I thought that was awesome. I know they're the only city in Ontario that's doing that, whether they're the one in Canada as well. So it was very interesting. And if you want a quick fix asphalt, the company, it comes in a bucket and you mix it with water and it turns
Really,
out.
eh?
So,
Thought it was a hockey puck.
there you go. Thanks for the opportunity for having me go. It was really, really interesting, and I found it quite down to earth in terms of their suggestions, improvement.
Debbie.
Thank you.
Just on a note about environmental and implications, I think every report from the counties has that, and I think we're starting to do that now too.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay,
So
good.
that there is that environmental effect.
Good.
Good point though, good catch. Thank you for that. Anyone else I may have missed, not listed? Okay, we're gonna move on to section 12, which is our staff reports. We're gonna start off with 12.1, which is staff report 29-2023, 2023 Community Awards Selection of Working Group. Caitlin, our deputy clerk, will speak to the report.
Yes, Mayor Fingar, through you to council. Tonight we have a staff report for the community awards. We will be looking to select a working group tonight. So I've just recapped the award process that we did. We opened on March 28th and closed the nomination period on April 14th. That's just under 3 weeks. The event is proposed to take place on July 4th at the amphitheater. We did speak with Shakespeare and the area will be cleaned up and all the props put aside for that event. So we're good to go there. And in the event of rain, we'll be moving to the Leo Boyden. It speaks a little bit to the advertisement that has taken place and the nominations received. We received a total of 6 nominations, and that counts the transfer of a nomination from a previous year. So following the selection of the panel tonight, we plan to have a meeting with this panel in the week of May 12th. Staff will attend, and then on the meeting of council for May 15th, we'll go into closed session and we'll discuss the selections for the panel.
Great.
Okay.
So would you like us to show of hands for who wants to be on the panel?
Yeah, through you, some members of council can volunteer and then go from there.
Okay, so hands up if you want to.
I'll volunteer.
1, 2, 3. There you go. Councillor Lockett.
Lockett and Young.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, the recommendation is that council receive staff report 29-2023 for information, and that council appoint the following 3 members to the business, citizen, and volunteer award selection panel for 2023. So they are Councillor Kirkby, Councillor Young, and Councillor Lockett. Can I have a mover and a seconder for this motion? There are 2. Deputy Mayor Campbell and Councillor Burton. All in favor? Perfect. Thank you. All right, the next staff report is 12.2, staff report 30-2023, the 2023 street repaving. The recommendation is that council direct staff to proceed with milling and repaving the surface of the following street sections in 2023. Prescott Center Drive, add concrete curb at North and repave North Lane. Churchill Road from next Palmer to the west train track, and Dibble Street west 30 meters west of the intersection at Edward Street. Can I get a mover and seconder for this motion? Councillor Lockett, Deputy Mayor Campbell. We're going to have Nathan Richards, thinking of Denise Richards. The Director of Operations, would you speak to this report?
Certainly, thank you, Junior Mayor. So every spring we generally come to council with a report that goes through different sections of town that have the surface of the streets are not in great shape and they should have some work done to them. So there is an assessment that's done with an outside company that was done in 2019 and 2022 to look at the streets and analyze what condition they're in. And over the last several years, there has been Ontario community infrastructure funding that is available through the province that assists with this work. So this year, in a previous council report, there was 38,000 allocated from this funding to do the deck on the bridge. So that has kind of come out of the budget before we kind of looked at the other streets. So figure 1 shows the road conditions from the program, and it's a bit of a granular look at it. So the streets that we have identified, one of them would be red on Prescott Center Drive. And Churchill Road shows as yellow, but you drive it, the north section has been redone as part of the arena project, but the south section is still in really rough shape. And same with the Dibble Street project, you'll see that section that we've identified is in really rough shape. We looked at potentially doing it when we did the intersection last year, but it didn't make sense to incorporate it in that project. So we pulled it out and had intent to do it during this phase of this type of work. So Churchill Road, so again, it's the in between roughly where the entrance is at Next Palmer's and to the west rail spur line, just the south end and the south side of the road. So again, a lot of that road has kind of been redone. So, and it's been in rough shape. It does see a lot of transfer truck traffic. So we thought that would be a great place to redo that. And plus it's going to start to see a lot of traffic for the arena, the recreation complex once it's open. And then Prescott Center Drive, So that's one where we want to add a curb. The only real way to kind of fix what's there is to add a curb on the north side so that the pavement has a place to stop and then also give it some resistance as the trucks are driving over it. So this would be on the north side of the lane. We would see a concrete curb get put in there in between the driveways. And then some asphalt would go in kind of where the gravel is now. And then we would look to mill and pave that first north lane or that north lane where the work's being done and then repave all that as well. And that will support the truck traffic coming in and out of there. And also it's, a prime location where if somebody's coming in off the highway and doesn't know the town, it's a nice place to have a nice section of street that's been repaved and looks good. And then the other, the little section there is on Dibble Street. And again, it's in pretty rough shape. And we just mill and pave it. And so that's it as far as the description of the areas. And then, so council could decide on other areas that we could look at in Prescott, and the budget amount was $225,000 for the year. So the work that we've just identified would be about $160,000. And then we're going to keep $65,000 to address some smaller road and curb repairs throughout the town, such as larger potholes. And there's some grates, culverts and manholes that have kind of sunken down to a kind of an uncomfortable level that we should look at this year as well. And that's it.
Perfect. Any questions for Nathan? Councillor Kirkby.
Yes, through you, Mayor Shankar. Just on the figure of the repaving of streets on your first diagram here, you see that there? I know you're just calling out the curve there, but I have another question. So that road, it all looks red to me. And by the way, I'm colorblind, so it could be green and red, and I wouldn't know. But is that road, is that owned by the town? And in this diagram, this whole road looks like it passes in front of Canadian Tire and O'Reilly's Independent. Is that correct? The town owns that road?
Yeah, so through you, Mayor Shankar. So the town owns the bulk of that road. It does, where the parking lot starts for the independent grocer, that part that kind of appears as a road is owned by the independent grocer chain. So yeah, there was I think a mix up at a point in time where that can get transferred.
Okay, so, sorry, just the one section then, Nathan, in front of Canadian Tire.
So the front of Canadian Tire definitely is the town of Prescott, but then as you get to that, the property line between the Canadian Tire and Independent.
Yep.
So east of that would be Independence.
Okay. And then so we're not adding any width there, right, around that. I guess we are adding a bit of width around that curve, would you say, of paving there?
Correct, yeah.
Yeah.
We'll be adding about a meter or two extra asphalt.
And then I guess on Churchill, are we adding some width there in front of them places? I know right now it's kind of gravel, what I'll call on the north side of that road of Churchill, where you've kind of have it mapped out here, and then it goes all the way down to the rink almost, the new community center. Is that going to be paved, or is that going to stay as a gravel shoulder there?
So which part exactly, like the?
North side of the road, you mean?
Yep, north side of the road. So if we go to this Churchill map here, I think there was some work done to the drainage.
Correct, yeah.
Yep. And so now it looks like it's all currently a gravel shoulder there.
That's correct.
Are we going to pave or curb that section? Do we have any plans there? Will we not have the same problems that we're seeing maybe up at Prescott Center Drive?
There wasn't any plans to do it at this point. The work that was done there was kind of in conjunction with the arena work.
Right.
So what we're doing right now is just kind of looking at the south side of the highway, south side of that road, but Matthew might have something to add to it.
So I think the difference between what we have at Ultramar and what we have on Churchill is the fact that around the Ultramar curve, there really isn't any ditch, and therefore there isn't an ability for snow and things like that to to get away. And so it erodes the side, whereas on Churchill, you do have ditches on both sides, and therefore it does have that ability to get away. So we wouldn't expect there to be that same deterioration, but really what we're finding on by the Ultramar is that trucks, when they go around the corner, they cut the corner, they end up kind of falling off the edge, and then it completely deteriorates that side. So in that particular area along Churchill, it's kind of a very slow stretch, and so we would expect them to be staying right on the road. We are, I think, when you take a look at the south side, I think that will end up being a little bit wider than it is today, and I think that should alleviate the issues as well.
Thank you. One last one through you, Mayor Shankar. Just, we talked about the potholes and the drain lids or sewer gates and stuff like that. Storm drains, thank you. Is there a date? And I think some of that work's happened, but for the potholes, I've had a few feedbacks show up in my inbox. And I'm wondering if there's a date where they'll be addressed and if we have a map, kind of the big ones in town.
Mayor Shankar, so I know the staff typically, once the snow is gone, they are aware of kind of where the major potholes are, and they do go start filling them up with the cold patch. I think they've been out 2 or 3 times. We don't have a map per se, but they typically do drive around the town each week and have a good idea where the bigger potholes are. But if we are missing some, we absolutely would invite the council or the public to let us know if we yeah, they've gone out a couple times, so this spring.
Thank you.
Sorry, just on your question there, Nathan, with the diagram of Prescott Center Drive, is it looking at repaving and putting a curb in between the 2 blue highlights?
Exactly, yes.
Because I thought though, like closer to the lights, that corner gets beat up. So I was thinking a curb there would be good.
Correct. So the corner, so that intersection is actually owned by the Ministry of Transportation, Mitchell. And there was a major problem with where again, once you have truck tires turning, it's very difficult on asphalt. So we found there that it kept coming, like digging it out. So we would go and repair it. And then we did communicate with the Ministry of Transportation a few times, and then they did a major repair that one evening, maybe almost 2 years ago now. So that you'll see that intersection's all been redone.
Okay. Very good. Thank you. Councillor McConnell?
Thank you, Mayor Shankar. To the point that Councillor Kirkby made about paving the shoulder on Churchill Road, I made the comment, request, whatever, while we were talking about building the arena back there, that the shoulder should be paved from Churchill Road to the arena and on Sophia Street on the east side from the railroad tracks to the arena eventually. Like right now, there's a lot of kids that, well, not right now, but in the past, there's been a lot of kids that walk to a Friday night hockey game, or adults. It's a bit of a hike where the rink is right now, but if you don't have a driver's license, you're gonna have to do it. And with the graveled shoulder, people are gonna be walking on the road. And I think it's not a really good idea to have that. So I know it was not in the budget for the arena, and they cut that pretty close. But going forward, I would like to see that in a budget for next year. So if that could be something that we could work towards, or possibly something in a recreation grant that we could look forward to do that, because I think it's a safety issue. I mean, to build a cement sidewalk in those 2 areas, I can't imagine what the cost of it would be, but if we were to pave them and put a white line or a yellow line along there with the pedestrian and maybe bicycle markings, I think that would be the economical and fairly safe way to do it.
Okay. Sounds good.
Thank you.
So completely agree. The reason why we can't incorporate as part of this, because OSIF doesn't allow for that type of work to be funded when it comes to to that type of walkway. But completely agree, it's on, I'd like to try and see it, at least part of it done in 24 and finished in 25. And I think it makes a great dent into our overall active transportation plan and how we move that forward.
Yeah, very often the provincial government is making big noises on pathways in communities, bicycle paths, walking paths. And I think this would fit right into it for a grant type of status.
Well, definitely.
I'm glad to hear you have your eyeballs on the situation, Mr. Armstrong.
So,
Thank you, Councilor McConnell. Anyone else? Thank you, Nathan. Very good. Okay, moving on to staff report 31-2022. Sorry. Let me guess. We should move it?
You do have a mover and a seconder, Councillor Lockett and Councillor Campbell, to just to call the question.
All in favor? Thank you. Sorry about that. Okay, 12.3 is staff report 31-2023, water tower approval to issue RFP. Recommendation reads that council directs staff to release a request for proposal for the water tower infrastructure project as outlined in staff report 31-2023. Can I get a mover and a seconder, and then we'll discuss? Councillor Kirkley and Councillor McConnell. Nathan, you got this one?
Yeah. Mayor Shankar. So there was an infrastructure report that came to council, I believe, last year, kind of discussing this project a little bit. So this is to provide council with some information on the water tower project that's planned for 2023. The existing water tower is about 50 years old, and it is close to the end of its useful life. In 2021, there was an application submitted to Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program for funding for the tower, and that was approved in 2022. And the grant will cover about 5.1 million of the estimated 6.9 million, leaving 1.85 million for the town to contribute. So some of the funding would come from 90,000 that was from the township of Augusta, and funding as part of the Augusta Landing Services Agreement. And then the town also dedicated funds generated by the sale of 555 King Street towards the replacement of the tower. So there's about 1.5 million continue to be funded through reserves or debt payments. Staff have been working with UBB Engineering to prepare and design and the project costing, which includes the construction of the tower, decommissioning the existing tower, engineering, geotechnical, all the typical work that you need to have kind of done ahead of time before you go to tender. So all the drawings and documents are complete and ready for issuance. The location of the tower is going to be just west of the new arena. So it's going to be a spot where a lot of people are going to see it. You'll even probably be able to see it from the highway, I suspect. Yeah, definitely you will be able to. And so once these, and then the other drawing there is just kind of more of an engineering drawing showing the details of the plan view. Once the new tower is up and running, the old tower would be demolished through, again, another request for proposal. Some of the things that we're incorporating is some design and artwork. So the design will have an increased capacity of almost 100% more than the current one. So it'll be 4,200 cubic meters, which increases a whole bunch, the main components of a water tower, which are the equalization, storage, emergency, and a fire storage. The current tower is 2,270 cubic meters, which it doesn't meet the current needs of the town. So there's a concept drawing there. And so, again, the design is a typical style of tower you'd see in most towns or cities. The top of the tower could be painted like a lighthouse, which follows one of our tourism assets, and the image that is going to be incorporated into some new lights that are coming to the poles on King Street. An example of some of the art that this could look like is a newly constructed water tower in Maxwell. In the township of North Glengarry, they incorporated the tartan, which shows a distinctive Scottish theme a Highland theme to allow the tower to stand out. So it's kind of a nice thing to add to a project like this. So the alternatives is council could decide not to issue the RFP at this time, but funding has to be spent by the end of March 2026 as per the agreement. The total costs There's about 6.75 for the construction and then another 180,000 for design and contract and inspection. And so if we have approval this evening, then we'll go into tender, and then once the results are known, we'd come back to council for review and consideration once we have the information from the proposal submissions. So.
Great, thank you. Questions? Councillor McConnell?
Demolition of the old one, is that got anything to do with the company that's building the new one, or is that a proposal, or is that gonna be issued after the other one is built?
Yeah.
Totally separate?
Your mayor, yeah, it's totally separate contract that will be issued, yeah, and a separate request for proposal.
Okay. Then I just have one suggestion. The painting of a lighthouse sounds really cool. But if it cost 50 grand to paint a lighthouse on the top and 5 grand to paint Prescott on one side or the other, I think council should have the option of deciding that. So I would like to see both options go in.
I think,
to the
Mayor,
proposal.
that'd be a great idea. We could do it as a provisional item in the contract to say, you know, what's your standard painting process on these towers, and you know, what would be the cost to upgrade it to something different, like an artist type concept. So we'll have to separate that out.
I have Councillor Lockett, then Councillor Wright.
So Nathan, if this goes to tender, say this month, what timeline are we looking at? Obviously before 2026, I know.
Yes, exactly. So
I believe if I have this correct, we would see the tenders come back in June. They would mobilize potentially in August, start their construction. It really depends on kind of the weather, that sort of thing. So done by end of 24 or spring of 25. We're trying to avoid any concrete work in the winter months. And it actually saves us by allowing them to have a little bit more time. So if things are clicking along and things are going well, it would be done by the end of 24. If not, then spring of 25. And so more than enough time we have to get it commissioned and ready to go.
And then after that, you would do another tender to dismantle, okay?
yeah, to do demolition on the existing tower, that's right. Yeah, once this one's up and running and everything's good on it, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Young?
I was just wondering, thank you, Mayor Shankar, through you. When we talk about the design for the lighthouse, is a company that builds a water tower able to do a design for a lighthouse? So just wondering if that should be an artist, yeah.
Yep. So absolutely, we'd employ an artist to create the design. Basically, and I have to speak to Dan about this in terms of the artist we'd like to use. I just hadn't mentioned that to her. And so, yeah, you're exactly correct. They don't specialize in this. All they want to know is, what's it supposed to look like? They create the bowl, that sort of thing. They'll provide time for whatever design we end up going with to actually come to fruition. And we would have somebody else actually paint it on, that sort of thing. Depending on, and that's exactly what they did with Maxville. So they had a separate artist do the design, as well as a separate artist come in and actually do the artwork on the tower itself. So you're exactly correct. It's not what they specialize in. And I think we'll go through a couple of iterations to bring that back to council and say, here's what a white tower looks like with our town logo. Here's what it could possibly look like if we were doing something with red on the top and to make it look somewhat like a water or like a lighthouse.
Thank you.
Through you, Mayor Shankar. Nathan, the current part here, or the part that says the current tower has a capacity of 2,270 cubic meters, which does not meet the current needs. My question is, how much room, when we add this, what is our current needs? And then how much room do we have after that? Now, maybe you can't answer that, but I'm just wondering, kind of thinking of structure and more housing.
So if you want me to take a crack at this one? So through you, Mr. Mayor. So what it has been done is it's sized to the size of our water treatment plant. So our water treatment plant is sized for 8,000 cubic meters. per day. And we're only using kind of in the 50 to 60% range. So we would almost have to double in order to get to where we need to, that we'd be maxing it out. So that's why they sized it at that. So lots of excess capacity, that sort of thing. There is also a large amount of requirement when it comes to emergency capacity. So if the water treatment plant went down, it would have to be able to service the town for so many hours, as well as firefighting capacity. So those are two areas where we're actually a little bit under where we need to be right now. So it addresses that. It provides us to be able to go up to that 8,000 cubic meters per day. And then if we're starting to max those out, then there's other things that we can do throughout the system without having to add to the size of the water tower. Because at the end of the day, you only want to build a water tower as big as the time that you're going to be actually reconstructing it. If you're looking at massive amounts of extra capacity and that sort of thing, there's cheaper ways to do it. And so that's where we look at holding tanks at the water treatment plant or holding tanks throughout the system itself to be able to support that. The fact that we have a water tower and we're replacing a water tower, we want to make sure that it matched what our capacity of the plant was.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else? Oh, Councilor, Deputy Mayor.
To Nathan, your third paragraph in your background, you said staff have been working with this engineering firm to prepare the design and project costing, which includes the construction of the new water tower, decommissioning of the existing water tower, on and on and on. So I'm still unclear as to whether that's what's gonna go out for tender.
Yeah, good, through your Mayor Shankar. So the RFP that you would approve for this evening would include all of those things except the decommissioning of the existing tower. We've added that in there because it's just something that they have been working on as far as kind of a budgetary thing, and also looking at what steps need to be done first, like a designated substance review of the tower, and also like a proper survey. So it'll be separate from the new water tower.
Thank you.
Thank you. I just have a question. So Nathan, in your financial breakdown, 90,000 design, what is that? Does that include the painting of it? Or is it just picking a design?
No, so that is the technical engineering work that's gone into exactly what the size of the tower, the size of the base, the size of the bowl, all of that. So it's the engineering design as opposed to anything that's superfluous to that.
Thank you. Councilor McCollum?
Thank you, Mayor Shankar. This is a metal tower, correct? As opposed to the cement tower that we have now. Now it looks like a cement base with a metal tower on top of it.
It's, yeah, I believe it's concrete, like, substructure going up and then a metal tank on the inside.
Okay. The only thing I'd like to add that maybe we could put in the request for proposal, this is being built right adjacent to a parking lot that we are going to pave very shortly. And as part of the RFP, I would like something that reads like any damage to that parking lot is repaired at the expense of the contractor, the general contractor. Because there's a lot of heavy stuff I can see involved here, and I would hate to see the quantity of asphalt that's going to wind up damaged possibly by that, us eat the money for it. Either that or just don't pave the parking lot till the thing is done, but it was not going to be done for another 2 or 3 years. I don't think that's very feasible either. That's a lot of dirt tracking into the rink. So I really think that should be part of the RFP, because there's a street on one side which you're not going to be able to block, not much room to the south. So it looks to me like you're going to be on part of that parking lot for possibly a considerable period of time.
So also what we'll have them do is create a temporary entrance. So it's between the two laneways of the arena. And so we'll have them create a temporary entrance for them so that they're keeping off of those other entrances and the asphalt. So good point. We want to make sure that we're preserving everything that we're currently doing there. And we would like to kind of contain them to the site where they need to be.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Call the question. All in favor? Great. Thank you, Nathan. Okay, moving on to 12.4, staff report 32-2023, community improvement plan amendment approval. Motion is the council approve the proposed community improvement plan amendments as presented and approved by the PAC in accordance with section 28 of the Planning Act RSO 19 as amended. Can I get a mover and seconder just for discussion? Councillor Kirkby, Councillor Burton. Dana, you got the floor.
Through you, Mayor Shankar, the council. Thank you very much for this opportunity to present the amended community improvement plan. So as noted, this plan went before the Planning Advisory Committee on April 24th, 2023. And they were in unanimous approval of the document aside from 2 amendments. So I'll just take you through just a bit of the background for this process. In 2022, the staff was designated by council to engage in a review of the community improvement plan. We'd been working with this plan for about 4 years now and had been essentially shortlisting a number of potential amendments and enhancements to the program that came from consultation with recipients to date, and also looking at other municipalities and their CIP programs. So we were directed to proceed with that and brought the amendments back to the Planning Advisory Committee in 2022. And they provided a very comprehensive review and some great feedback. And we went back to over the last few months and prepared the actual formal plan, and then brought that back to the Planning Advisory Committee last week, which we have for you today for approval, aside from the 2 amendments that I noted earlier, one of which was eliminating the residential grant cap funding of $2,000, just so that to essentially remove the restrictions around that. And also that was for the downtown area, as well as reducing the quote requirement from 3 to a minimum of 1, preferably 2. This was an area that many past recipients had expressed hardship with. It's becoming very difficult to obtain quotes, and the ones that we do obtain are always through reputable suppliers. So we felt that this was a little bit prohibitive, and a member of the Planning Advisory Committee suggested we may want to look at reducing this, and it certainly aligned with our experience. So we're bringing the full document before council for consideration tonight. I'm going to take you through a bit of a condensed review of the sections. We have 5 areas, one of which is new that we're proposing. The first is Area 1, which is the downtown core and Riverwalk district area. So that shows you a map of all properties within that area would be eligible that have commercial zoning. So it's not for residential properties, it's specific for properties that have a commercial zoning component. And we'll basically take you through the kind of before and after of this area. And this area is really focused on the downtown, so the small to medium-sized businesses that are also that are usually occupying heritage properties that have, significant architectural detail and would then be better positioned to benefit from the type of incentives that we're offering under this program. So under Area 1, we had several different categories broken out under this area, and we've actually decided to combine them again to provide for some more flexibility. So previously we had a signage grant, which was up to $1,000. And then we had a facade grant, so that's for exterior improvements, and that was up to $5,000. And just to note throughout, whenever we do talk about grants, it's always for 50%. So we would only provide up to 50% of funding, and the business or property owner would be required to match that with the other 50%. So next brings us to the interior commercial grant. That was up to $3,000 previously, and then we had a residential grant up to $2,000. And then we also offered an accessibility grant, which was up to $5,000. So we've decided to combine all those into one property improvement grant, which would be up to $22,000. And it would essentially still cover all those areas. So same areas that you could look at before would be covered under the new grant. And we do just want to note there for that residential area, we were considering capping that because it was capped previously. But the recommendation from PAC was to eliminate that cap because we do have a requirement for the property to have a commercial component. So that always ensures that we aren't just funding a straight up residential property that happens to reside in that downtown core. And then on to the next grant that we offered was a permit fees grant. And that previously was up to $500. And we found that that was quite limiting, especially when we were getting into some of the bigger projects. So we recommended for this one that it's be increased up to $1,000 or 10% of the building permit fee, whichever amount is higher. So that just provides a little bit more funding available under that grant for those larger projects that are being subjected to a lot, some pretty extensive permit fees. And this also covers sign permit fees as well. So we do provide the sign grant, and we wanted to provide support for those expenses too. And then we had our interest-free loan, which is previously up to $20,000, and we're recommending that be increased up to $100,000. Again, not to exceed 50% of the total project value. We're really trying to encourage property owners and business owners to, property owners specifically, to really look at those second and third stories of the properties. Previously, that $20,000 loan was really geared more towards the businesses that are looking specifically at making commercial improvements, whereas the $100,000 would really open things up to property owners that would like to address the second and third stories, but just don't necessarily have the capital to do so. And then the next incentive under this area is the property tax increment. So there's no change recommended to that. That essentially provides a grant to offset the tax increase that automatically comes with property improvements. And it's payable at 100%, decreasing by 20% each year for a maximum of 5 years. It's something that just automatically comes when you take out a building permit. MPAC automatically reassesses the property. So these improvements generally go hand in hand with increased taxation, which again can be a little bit prohibitive to property owners, and we're trying to eliminate that. And then this just takes you through some of the housekeeping changes that we wanted to bring in. For example, adopting a new sign and lighting design guidelines, as well as a new color palette for the downtown that really tries to respect some of the heritage colors that we've seen in the community, and also take us into the next period so that we can still remain as current and relevant as possible when it comes to downtown design. And some of the other aspects that we've adjusted here are allowing for multiple facade applications to be submitted for properties where they're situated on corner lots. Also expanding the eligible area to include a larger portion of Edward Street up to the railway and further west down to Sophia Street. So there were a few businesses within a 2-block area that weren't included in the previous CIP program, so they would be eligible under this new one. And then issuing loan funds as installments versus lump sum, so they're tied more to completion of the project phases. We found previously that issuing the loans as a lump sum could be a little bit problematic sometimes when it comes to keeping projects on track. And then extending the project completion deadline from 12 to 24 months. Previously, applicants only had a year to complete the project, which, you know, some of these projects are pretty extensive, and just based on sometimes supply limitations, it can take a lot longer than originally anticipated. And then we're also recommending permitting multiple funding applications per property. This was something that was very restrictive previously. Under the program, you could only apply and receive funding through this program once for any property. So you could have a business that comes in, receives the incentives, and, you know, sadly, they may close in 3 years, or they may relocate and on a more positive note and expand to a new location. And unfortunately, once that property has received funding once, a new business can't come in and tap into that again. So it was pretty restrictive when we're trying again to encourage new businesses to be coming in and filling these vacant spaces. So we would recommend eliminating that and allowing for subsequent renovations or funding if renovations are completed no less than 36 months, as long as they are distinctly different from the previously funded project. So you can't go back in 36 months and refund the same project. It's about enhancing the existing project. And then also, if the commercial tenancy changes within no less than 24 months of funding previously being received, then that new tenant would be eligible. And then no less than 5 years following the receipt of previous CIP funding. So that's in the case where it's inevitable at a certain point, these improvements are going to get tired and age and require upkeep and renovation and ongoing improvement. So that's really what that's providing for. And then we also have incorporated a grant repayment requirement if the project isn't completed within 24 months of approval, and if the property sells and changes use within 24 months of approval. Really just trying to ensure that when we are extending grants, that they are going towards projects that are going to maintain commercial zoning and essentially meet the original intent of that program and why that funding was first provided. So that takes us through area one. The next will go much faster, I promise, because a lot of this is duplication. So for area two, this is for the employment lands. So you'll see the map there. That essentially covers the entire town. Previously, that really was just only properties in the industrial area were eligible. So that would be more in the industrial park over by Sophia, where you see Prescott Transportation, where the new arena is going in, and just south of the railroad tracks where we have a few industrial properties. So that was the previous area, and we're recommending expanding this out to include the entire town, aside from the downtown core, and that would open this area up to other businesses that aren't necessarily industrial zoned, because we do have a lot of businesses in that area that are making improvements, and we felt it would be warranted to look at providing incentive options to them as well. And then this also takes in some of those small to medium enterprises that weren't covered under the downtown core. Because again, they are extremely valuable regardless of where a business resides in our community. They're extremely important to the town as a whole, and we felt it was important to extend that incentive to all businesses in some shape or form. So this takes you through, previously we had, as mentioned, a combination of grants. This one was a little bit different, where we provided no residential because it was geared more to industrial properties. So we provided up to 50% interior commercial funding for $3,000, accessibility grant up to $3,000, and a permit fees grant up to $500. So for this one, we've actually recommended combining this again, increasing the amount to $13,000, and also recommending some new eligible expenses, which would be streetscaping, so landscaping, pedestrian amenities, and ground signage. So that again is really geared more to the type of businesses that you see in that area that would be more industrial or larger scale commercial in nature, that would have more of a need for these type of incentives than some of the ones offered in the downtown core. And we are again recommending an increase of the interest-free loan from 20,000 up to 100,000, not to exceed 50% of the total project value. And also offering a property tax increment grant under this area. No change to that program, exact same as the downtown category, starting at 100% up to 5 years, decreasing by 20% a year. And then a few housekeeping items under this area we're recommending. Again, very similar to the previous one, except for one specific to the employment areas that the applicant must demonstrate the project will have a direct result of permanently increasing employment. So we felt that that was an important piece to that area because they are larger scale employers that tend to have multiple employees as opposed to those downtown core businesses, which the majority really do tend to be owner operated in most cases. So again, increasing the project deadline from 12 to 24 months, permitting the multiple funding applications per property, similar to the downtown core, so it's not so restrictive. And then that brings me into heritage conservation. So this area covers all properties that have heritage designation or have been deemed historically significant. So that's essentially everything south of the railway because we don't have any historic or heritage properties north of the tracks. And that could be properties that are zoned commercial or residential. The key aspect, eligibility requirement is the heritage designation piece. So there are properties in the downtown core that have heritage designation that may be looking for some of these incentives versus some of the other ones, as well as residential properties too. So under this, we had previously offered grants for engineering or architectural reports because a lot of times that does tend to come with improvements being made to designated properties. And we offered facade, accessibility, and interior improvement. So recommending that get combined to provide up to $9,000, but we aren't recommending any increases to amounts per se. It's just combining those into one category to provide for some more flexibility. Building permit application fee, exact same recommended increase as before, up to $1,000 or 10%. And we are recommending a new interest-free loan under this category. There was no loan previously available. Very similar to the other, up to $100,000, not to exceed 50%. And it is 0% interest, repayable over 5 to 8 years, depending on the amount of the loan funds that they take. So the $20,000 was repayable over 5, but we've extended the repayment period because we're now offering up to $100,000. And again, just some of the housekeeping changes under here would be identical to previous ones. Issuing loan funds as installment versus lump sum, increasing the project deadline from 12 to 24 months, and then incorporating the grant repayment requirement. Which brings me into brownfields. So this covers the entire town. Now, essentially, brownfield covers any properties that have a potential of being contaminated. So this could be a property that served as a former gas station. It could be a former industrial property that has some sort of contamination from past use that now has to be cleaned up essentially and all of the contaminated soil removed and new soil brought in to replace it so it can then be developed. So that can be a pretty prohibitive undertaking for a lot of developers. And there are certainly some properties in town that have either been confirmed to be contaminated or have a potential of being. So this provides funding for property owners to engage in the environmental site assessments that need to be completed to confirm whether they are indeed contaminated and then to actually proceed with the remediation. So we provide up to $15,000 for phase 1 and phase 2 environmental site assessments. They were separated before, but we're recommending combining them. So up to $15,000, just in case one happens to be, a higher expense than anticipated, that then they can still tap into the full funding there. Same increase to the building permit fees grant from $500 up to $1,000 or 10% thereof. Property tax cancellation, that's a new one that's provided only for the brownfield area. which essentially means that during that rehabilitation and remediation period, the taxation is canceled. So the municipality has the power essentially to waive the taxes for that period. And then as soon as they have their occupancy, then the taxes would resume. And then we also provide the property tax increment, which will offset that increase that comes post redevelopment of that site. And then again, very similar other changes housekeeping wise, increasing the deadline from 12 to 36 months for this one, because it is a brownfield and they tend to take a much longer time to actually complete, especially if you're getting into a full-on remediation. And that brings me to the last area, which is a new area that we recommended that was supported by the Planning Advisory Committee, which is a residential development area specifically for affordable housing of a large scale nature. So this is not for an individual to construct a one-family home. It would be for a multi-unit residential development. And for this incentive, we are recommending providing the building permit fee grant, that would be up to $1,000 or 10%, and the property tax increment program. And for this one, we're recommending that it start at 50% versus 100%, just because of the large amount that could be associated with this. It could be quite extensive. And it would decrease by 50% each year and run for a period of 5 years. So some of the other requirements, there's some pretty strict requirements affiliated with this program. One of which being it needs to have an affordable housing component. So a minimum of 10% of residential units would need to meet that definition of affordable. And it needs to also have a minimum project size of 5 million. So that's to really deter or eliminate those single family homes applications or people just looking to tap into it for, you know, a small scale development. That's really not what it's geared for. It's hopefully to encourage, as I mentioned, multi-unit residential to address some of the housing issues that we're certainly facing in our community. And no, I think that covers the key aspects there. And just to touch on for the affordable housing component, so that essentially equates to a 30% of gross annual income for housing. That's essentially the definition that the universally accepted definition. And then just a few other general housekeeping changes. We added a definition section, amalgamation of the grant funds, and also clarifying that only one area stream can be applied to per property. Just to really tighten up the language in there, there were a few areas that were just left a bit too open to interpretation that made it somewhat difficult when it came to implementing. So I'm thinking that this will help reduce some of those issues, as well as finally reduce the quote requirement from 3 to a minimum of 1, preferably 2. So we've certainly run into this in many cases, and we don't want to create hardship for people that are looking to tap into this funding that just simply cannot get the quotes required. And then from a financial implication perspective, no immediate implication associated with approving this. We are anticipating a pretty significant uptake, though. I can tell you that I have a number of businesses and property owners that are anxiously waiting in the wings to apply. So we're, as part of the 2023 annual budget, we have the $25,000 allocation. That's something that we generally depend on, happens every year, and which comes out of what used to be the vacancy rebate that the municipality actually had to pay out to property owners that were leaving their properties vacant and were able to tap into a rebate. So that $25,000 kind of represents what the municipality used to pay out annually. And then we're also recommending to accommodate the influx that we're anticipating, a one-time transfer of $100,000 from the fiscal reserve policy. So that brings me to the end of my presentation. There's a very large attachment there that I hope you've had an opportunity to at least skimmed through. Happy to answer any questions at this time.
So through you, Mayor Shankar, Dana, to me, just listening to this is overwhelming, but it sounds to me like it's a bit of an accounting nightmare to keep track of all the stipulations and guidelines. And so does that all happen through the office here?
It does, yeah.
And how many people approximately would you have taking part in this now?
Now, at the moment, I believe that we're managing 12 applications that are just ongoing, working through, progressing through their funding. And then I would anticipate we would probably see anywhere from 10 to possibly as many as 20 come in this year.
Okay. I know you've touched on the time limits for things, but if a project goes on for 3 or 4 years, like how do you handle that? Like, is there do they have to start paying things back, or at what point do we say that's enough? This has gone on for 5 years or whatever.
It's certainly, it's happened once, I will say, in the time that I've been administering the program. And there will be, with these new amendments, there will be greater options for us to actually implement when it comes to that. For example, cancellation. What we've done in the past is generally we'll terminate the funding as it stands if we've reached that deadline, and we work with applicants. We will provide extensions, and unfortunately it has gotten to the point with one case where we did have to essentially terminate the grant and just call back the loan is generally what happens. So if it's a grant, we'll terminate it if they haven't used the funds that have been allocated to them. A lot of times they have, and they just aren't able to use the full amount or completely finish the project. And then with the loans, at that point, we would, if it hadn't been fully paid out, we would stop payments, and then we would actually initiate the repayment process on the loan immediately.
Okay.
Matthew, am I missing any?
No, you have it exactly. And so in the new plan, we do have provisions that if it's not completed within 24 months, then we can claw it back. Not only the amount that we haven't paid, but the amount that we have paid. So that's certainly something that we wanted to put as a little bit of incentive for people to complete their projects quickly.
Good.
Yeah, thanks.
Yes, through you, Mayor Shankar, I wrote some notes on this, and it was a very long package, but it was very well worded, so hats off, Dana. One question I have, or a couple actually. So the 22,000, let's just call it for the downtown and Riverwalk district. If I wanted to, now the way I read this is kind of caps in each thing, but if I wanted to spend the 22,000, let's say, just on my facade, am I eligible to do that?
You could, yes. So that's what we've done this year. That's why we really wanted to combine it. Well, not this year, but for this amended version, to allow for just that option. If someone wanted to do a more extensive facade restoration and maybe the interior commercial was already done in tip-top shape, so there was no need to apply the grant funds to that, and they could take that full $22,000 and apply it to the facade.
And I could do the same for my interior commercial or interior residential, is that true?
So that's where the interior residential, no. We had capped it at 2,000, but there is a requirement, we have eliminated that, but there is a requirement that there needs to be a commercial component. So they could, potentially put $20,000 in residential and 2,000 in commercial, but there has to be a commercial component to that project.
So then for my accessibility, right? I want to put an elevator in to service my residential apartments above. Do I have the full 22,000 or am I capped at 5,000?
So we would want to see a portion of that be, now you're asking a difficult question. But the elevator service the commercial tenants.
I mean.
If not,
No.
then it would fall more under residential, would be my interpretation of it. Which then would require you to have some portion of commercial. But you could apply, you could use $20,000 of the grant for the elevator and then tap into the $100,000 loan for the rest.
Assuming that it has a commercial component.
Yes.
So if it's simply to do the residential on the second and third floor, then no, it wouldn't be approved because there is no commercial component to it.
So, through you, Mayor Shanker, that's the one thing I would say, because accessibility to a lot of them second and third story apartments, right? It's 2023, we need elevators in them things if we want to get, certain clients, or you want to see them expanded into almost condominium style living. And I feel like with that limitation, kind of minimizing the potential of downtown residents, living over top of these stores or commercial buildings.
So if I can, that's where the loan is really meant to factor in, because we recognize the grants only cover so much, and to really try and encourage those more extensive renovations, that's why we're recommending the increase of the loan from $20,000 up to $100,000. And again, that's repayable at 0%, and repayments don't start until a year after the work is completed. So it provides a lot of flexibility there versus, say, going to a traditional financial institution for loan funds.
Definitely. So thank you for that part. I'll move on to my next one. The employment lands. So to the Riverwalk, it looks like we went up $6,000 into one section to make that 22, up another 500, and then we upped the loan by 80,000. But in the employment lands, it looks like kind of stayed around. We're in that 7,000. We've up there. The brownfields, we really haven't increased much there. The way I read it, by the way. And same with the new development for housing. And I'm just wondering, obviously, where do we stack up, I guess, with the rest of the communities in our area that are our size for these kind of incentives?
So I will say from that perspective, we are very progressive when it comes to the incentives that we provide through our CIP program. I would say there is no comparable municipality that is providing this level of incentive that we are, especially with the residential component. That is something that is completely new. Very few municipalities are offering that. From the downtown employment lands perspective, the heritage and brownfield, we are very much on par. You do tend to see them. The downtown does tend to be that larger area of investment. And that is where we do tend to get the majority of our uptake. I would say 90% of CIP projects that we fund are for that downtown area. We see probably another 8% out of the employment lands, and then maybe another 2% out of the heritage and the brownfield. And then the residential is a completely new category. I'm not familiar with municipalities of comparable size that are offering this one. There are some larger municipalities that are delving into these residential incentives, but they're all over the board. The ones that we researched most were providing property tax increments. Some were even providing outright financial grants, but we felt for this purpose that the permit fee and the tax increment grant were probably the best way to go, and would also be, something that would be more sustainable for the municipality and our current budget. Mm-hmm. But I'm happy to provide research if council should desire. We can provide some additional research on what others are doing.
To you, Mayor Shanker. No, I think, I was just interested to see if you had that. It's not that big. I think we are offering a lot here. The one thing I was wondering is, did we say to be eligible for the employment lands, there has to be an increase in employment opportunities for any of that grant to be receivable.
We did. How we actually review that is to be determined. I think we can also look at improvements, and Matthew, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know that it necessarily would have to be an immediate increase in employment. It certainly needs to be fleshed out a bit, but I think there also needs to be an anticipated increase that would come with the type of improvements that are being made too, right? Like this would essentially position an employer to hire more employees, to grow their operation, to become more effective, attract new customers. And we would like to see, of course, as part of the application, we would require applicants to at least give an indication of what they're expecting to generate in employee increases.
So on that note, I'll spin it this way. If I had a smaller business, let's say I had 5 employees, I have 1 retire, or let's say I have 2, 1 retire and 1 quit. And now we're in this market currently where it's hard to hire anybody, but I have these funds available that will allow me to automate a bit and stay open versus, stay how I am and just have a high turnover rate of employees because I can't find the people that want to work in that field. Right? I think, to me, we're saying, well, and that's what we're saying, is that you have to prove eventually you're going to hire more people, where I think, we should be helping them keep the doors open in a sense and not put so much onus on
Job
hiring,
efficiencies.
right? Helping them increase their throughput, helping them keep the doors open, helping them continue to pay taxes to the town, right? That's just maybe something for consideration. And then I'll wrap it up quickly here for you, sorry, is the large housing development, right? So we said residential development with affordable housing component. So for any of these grants, I think what I'm hearing is 1 unit per development. Is that what we're calling 10% of residential units within development would meet the definition of affordable and be at the minimum of 1 unit? Is that so?
Yes, yes.
10% up to 1, minimum 1 unit.
Minimum 1 unit.
That, if I may, that being said, there's also the proviso that it's a $5 million development. So we would expect there to be at least 20 to 30 units at that point, and you'd probably be, if 10%, then you're at 2 to 3, that sort of thing. So and it's not necessarily attractive to developers to include that because they take a loss on those particular ones. So that's why we're providing that incentive.
So sorry, Matt, are you saying with this program, we're actually turning away potential customers or potential builders?
No, so it would only apply to projects that are $5 million and more. Because there's other programs out there, offers from the United Counties, CMHC, that sort of thing, that would apply to those smaller projects that they could be able to apply to.
So if we wanted a condo and they wanted to have 20 units in it that were potentially selling for 600,000, we're going to tell them no.
No, they apply for this.
They can't be eligible for this if they
Apply for this. They can still build their condo.
But they don't.
Apply for this.
can't tap into the CIP incentive.
So,
Yeah.
so each one of these areas has a very specific goal. The downtown one being to revitalize the downtown, brownfields to make that useful again, the employment to increase employment opportunities. This one is to focus on affordable housing. So it's not to give every single builder the incentive to build by actually to include affordable housing as part of their development.
Yeah, so when I see large scale residential development, I think it's more than just a house, right? I would like some kind of incentive for somebody to build a nice big condo here in Prescott and not be tied to the affordable housing component, because there's so many spots along the river where they are being built, and there's zero currently that I'm aware of, except maybe one that's going on along the river. I just think we need to offer some kind of incentives to bring these developers here. Affordable housing, to me, on big scales, is in some of the lands that we have that are not being used, but I don't know if they'd be $5 million projects. You know, I don't know if we're doing enough to attract large scale residential development, period. Look at the last part.
So this one is definitely in that area where we're leading on the front edge of what others are doing. I'm not seeing municipalities providing general incentives for residential development if it doesn't have affordable housing included in it.
All right, thank you.
Councillor Young?
Thank you, Mayor Shankar, for you. Dina, if you have an open application right now that prior to this, will it be grandfathered with those limits, or will they be able to access the new limits?
They would be able to, we can certainly look at, we actually have one that we're in conversations with right now. So we're certainly open to, if they haven't used the full, then we could increase them into whatever the next highest amount is. So for example, if they were previously approved for $5,000 in CIP, then we could certainly look at an increase if they were still in the process of completing the project. Same with the loan as well. I've also had a conversation with Matthew on that accord, that if we had any applications that had been previously approved for loans that hadn't been closed out yet, if there was an interest on their part, they could increase that from 20 to 100 with the knowledge that, yes, it all does need to be repaid back eventually at the same rate. So there have been a couple that have expressed interest in both those options to date, yes.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor?
Through you. That was anyway. One question was what Justin asked about the employment lands, because there could be quite a few small businesses cropping up in there. And I didn't think of it, but the automation part is quite interesting, because they're trying to develop their efficiencies, but not hire extra people. That's just my point there. And not to get into it too much, but I thought when we had the affordable housing presentation, that it's not that it's affordable housing per se, like different housing, but it hits people at a different income level, right? So these people can be building whatever they're building, but then the people that want to move in there have to apply and say they only make $30,000.
So there's a big difference between geared to income and affordable housing.
Okay.
So affordable housing is just essentially an industry standard where it's been deemed that no one should, to be affordable, you should not be expensing more than 30% of your gross annual income on housing. If it is any more than that, then it would be deemed to be unaffordable, so to speak. So that is very different from geared to income. So that would not be what we're talking about, where someone actually has to go through an application process and be below a certain income threshold. That very totally different housing. That's where organized like Leeds Grenville counties and CMHC provide more of those grants to support social housing, for lack of a better word, or geared to income. This is simply to ensure that these properties are affordable for middle income families and individuals.
And somewhere along the line, someone says what that value is,
Matthew?
rentals.
So the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation determines what that should be by community. And then we use that information to be able to say, here's the maximum amount of rent that you'll be able to charge for this particular unit.
Okay, thank you.
Good.
All right, through you, Mayor Shanker. Thank you, Matthew. I maybe had got confused and Dana on that wording there gearing towards income and affordable housing. Just one last one, and I think you covered it in here, but I'll ask it. There was a lot of reading. Can you stack up some of these loans? So let's say I have a property in the Riverwalk district and it happens to be a heritage.
No. That's where you are essentially, you have to decide whatever program you feel is going to be the best suited to your needs. You would have to determine whether it's going to be heritage or downtown. And if you have a property in the downtown core that happens to have that heritage designation, as well as be commercially zoned, odds are you're probably going to want to go for the downtown versus the heritage. That one is really geared more to your true residential properties that have that heritage designation, or ones that are owned by, say, nonprofits.
Thank you.
And I have a question for you. So we're putting 25,000 into the budget, and we're going to put another 100,000 in?
That's the recommendation.
That's the recommendation. And what is the current balance?
I would have to defer to Matthew for that.
So I believe at the end of last year, we were very close to exhausting all of our, what we'd allocated so far. So as projects close, some of them end up being a little bit less, and so we're waiting for a couple to close. But what we're talking about is if you pass this tonight, then we have about 125,000 to look at for this year. So it doesn't take long if you're giving out downtown business loans or grants at $22,000 a piece. That's only going to get you 5 or 6. So it's that's why we have to put some parameters around it to be able to say you only qualify in A, B, and C, because at the end of the day, we can't afford absolutely anything. That being said, if we have a massive uptake and we burn through the next 125,000 fairly quickly, we'll be coming back to council and saying we have X number more. I think we can pull it from here, and we would seek for your approval at that point.
And where are we pulling it from? I know it says policy reserve, fiscal policy reserve.
So our fiscal policy reserve is the accumulation of all previous deficits and surpluses. And at the end of 2021, we had about 500,000 in there. At the end of 22, I expect there to be about 600,000. And so we'd be moving 100,000 of that amount over to the community improvement plan, which then gives us the 125 to spend this year.
And one more thing. So when we're providing a decrease in their taxes, that doesn't show up as a number, or does it show up as a number somewhere?
So it really all depends on what impact assesses it at. So let's say, for the sake of argument, my property is deemed at $250,000 in assessed value. And after I've done my renovations and everything, they then deem that it's 300,000. So in that first year, we're going to give you a rebate of that increase of 50,000. And so it's really going to depend on what that increase is. And that doesn't come out of the reserve. All that we do is we say, we're going to go forego that revenue in the first year, and then we'll start collecting it as we move forward in the larger amounts. So the only part that goes against the reserve is actually the grants. Anything to do with loans are simply an in and an out. As they get repaid, we draw down the outstanding receivable. And then with the incremental property taxes, we just collect them as we no longer forgive.
Okay. Where's the loans coming from? Not from this 125.
Yep. So the loans are simply, so if I give you 100,000, we record $100,000 receivable. As you pay it back, then that receivable draws down, and then it comes back to zero. So it never affects the income statement or the expenses and revenue.
But we're providing 100,000?
Yes. So the town, out of its overall cash, provides $100,000, and then it just comes back to us. But it's never an expense to the organization because it's only ever loaned out and then received.
So do we keep track of all these numbers?
No. That's my facetious answer. So it's something that I provide a complete schedule to our auditors every year that says, here's all the ones that were approved, here's the ones that were issued, here's the ones that were that are going through repayment, here's the ones that are outstanding, and all of those numbers should reflect. So they're always looking to say, you approved it here, you paid it here, the project is complete here, is it being repaid, yes or no? And so that's something that we absolutely keep track of. And so that, and it's incorporated as part of our financial statements. So under accounts receivable, there's an amount in there for all of the loans that have been paid out and receivable.
Very good, thank you.
And just to add, if God forbid they do default, it goes on their taxation as so we always have that ability to recover.
Absolutely. So it goes on to their property taxes, interest starts to accrue, and then if, heaven forbid, they end up selling the property or it goes through tax sale, we get paid first.
Okay, that's good. Go ahead.
So it's a great program, everybody's interested, everyone's applying, we have $125,000. Is there first come, first serve? Like what if everybody qualifies?
That's where Matthew, as he mentioned, he would be coming to council with a request for a top up. If everyone qualifies and is eligible based on the parameters of the program, then we would be coming to council for a budget increase at that point.
Which we would have to say yes, because, well, really, our hands would be tied. Like, is there any deadline date that people might miss or any kind of?
It's an open intake, so that is the one thing. And we did, I won't lie and say I didn't consider that just from our own, just from an administration standpoint, right? To have that constant ongoing intake can be one of those scenarios where it's just, you never know, and an application can land on your doorstep and now we're into processing that approval. So I have seen other municipalities will do like a quarterly intake, something we could consider, but at this point, it's just a full open intake.
There is verbiage in the plan itself that says it is first come, first serve, and the funds will be allocated until they're complete. So, everyone is well aware of that. We have been able to manage it over the last couple of years with projects beginning and ending that, as I mentioned, some don't use their full allocation, and we're able to reinvest that into the program.
Councilor McConnell?
Thank you, Mayor Shankar. I don't really have any questions, but just a few comments, having sat through a similar presentation over the years. Government isn't meant to be all things to all people. And unfortunately, when I look at this massive tome here that is very well done, but as Ruth said, it's kind of overwhelming. Having been on council many years ago when this was much smaller, this looks to me like we are trying to be all things to all people, and I don't think we should be. It is incumbent upon merchants who want to start a business and owners who own houses, whether they're residential heritage houses or buildings that are heritage buildings, to put some money in them, to upkeep them. We give a grant to somebody for, as Justin mentioned, if he wants to put the whole 22 grand into his fascia, the front of the store. It's a lot of money for a front, but I guess it could be done. We have nothing that I believe precludes somebody from doing that. But yet, if you looked at that building from the other side of the street, the upper 2/3 of the building might be an eyesore. It might be a building that hasn't had the top painted in 40 years. It might be a building that the upper floors aren't inhabited at all. And I think that if somebody asks for a grant or a loan for a lower frontage, and if they are the building owner, not the tenant, that it should be related to work to be done that we want done on the upper part as well as part of the package. It's unfortunate that in this election, there was no, what do they call it? A meeting where all the people can come and we all go and ask questions and tell people what we think. We didn't have that this time, and it's unfortunate. I think it is a good thing to have that. But Leanne, I think you would have to agree with me, having been here for multiple terms, that the question that always gets asked is what are you going to do for the downtown? That's where this started. What are you going to do for the downtown? The complaints that we get are the downtown stores are empty, the downtown, this building looks shitty. Yeah, if you live in a neighborhood that has a house, and there always seems to be one in every neighborhood that somebody doesn't look after as well as the neighbors would like, but that's a neighborhood issue. The downtown, that area where those big buildings are, they may be individually owned, but they are the heart and they belong to the community. That's where our focus started, and in my opinion, that's where our focus should still be. So I was very glad to hear Dana say that 90% of the loans and the grants are still going there. I am not in favor of taking that area up Edward Street. I think it should be contained within the downtown area where we have those large buildings. And if they all get to be in perfect shape, fine, then we go somewhere else. There's a color palette referred to in here. I don't go for that at all. I have been in business both here and in downtown Brockville. I own property in the downtown, and I don't particularly want somebody telling me I have to paint my building beige or I have to paint it gray because all the rest of them are in various tones like that. If that is what we require, then all those nice jelly bean houses that you always see advertised in Newfoundland, they wouldn't happen because they're all multiple colors. I think it should be far more flexible, the individual input into downtown. I don't think we should be restricting it. The brownfield, brownfield's tough because to fix the brownfield, we lost the development east of the marina simply because it's contaminated and the cost of doing something with it is ungodly. Really, what we can contribute to fixing that is probably not going to make up anybody's mind whether we're going to put a $20 million development on that or not. But what a lot of people don't realize is brownfield, thank God that banks are requiring an environmental survey on residential houses, because we ran into this when we built the fire hall. Many years ago, probably an awful lot of the houses in town were heated with coal. And what people did when the fire went out, you cleaned out the ashes, you shoveled them into your garden, which was in the back, and it was fertilizer. Well, it's not fertilizer anymore, it's contamination. We ran into that in those houses that we dropped to build the fire hall. I'd be willing to bet that half of the old houses in town have the same thing in their backyard. So as far as brownfield goes, if somebody like that came to us and said, well, the bank's on my case because of this. I would rather help them out than try and fire a couple $1,000 at somebody that wants to build a multi-million-dollar, because I don't think it's gonna make any difference. So long and short of it, in my opinion goes, as my opinion goes, this is a very comprehensive document, and we need a very comprehensive document. But I think it is more than we should have. I think it is more than is required. So as it sits right now, I would not be able to vote in favor of it. I would like to see a much more condensed, more simple thing presented to council. But what you have presented, Dana, is very good. Thank you.
Yeah. Anyone else? I think we've put a lot of time in on this, so thank you, Dana. I'm going to call the question. All in favor? Thank you. Do you want to record it or anything?
No, it's
So it's carried. Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to 12.5. Which is staff report 33-2023 Canada Day complimentary activities. The motion reads that council directs staff to work with George Tierney and Windmill Brewery to coordinate complimentary activities for Canada Day, July 1st, 2023. I got a mover and seconder. Thank you, Councillor Burton. Seconded by Councillor McConnell. And we're going to let Matthew take this one over.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. So what you have before you this evening is kind of our review of the request, as well as how we could support those complementary activities on Canada Day. So what we did is we actually looked at a model that's already out there, and that's the Cardinal Festival Committee. It's an arm's length committee. It's not a part of Edwardsburg Cardinal. They're completely arm's length, third party. They actually pay for the entire fireworks themselves, the insurance, all of those types of things. And then they put on festivities, I believe, on the Canada Day, as well as I think they did Labor Day last year as well. So we thought kind of following that type of model made perfect sense. If donors wanted to put donations towards the fireworks, then they would be directed towards the town. We could issue donation receipts in that case. And then it's completely separate from anything that the Windmill Brewery wants to do. We're more than happy to work with Windmill and put them in touch with the Fort. The Fort has a fairly extensive list of requirements as well as stipulations as to what can and can't occur on Fort property. So we're happy to kind of work through that with them. And then obviously we can support the street closures and that sort of thing. But what we would suggest is that the two sets of activities, those run by the town and those run by Windmill, be separate in arm's length so that we don't kind of get those mixed up. And then if there is any additional costs for food vendors, for beverage vendors, for third party entertainment, that sort of thing, that it becomes the responsibility of that committee or of that that wants to undertake the overall project. So that's really what we kind of put forward in this particular report, and more than happy to answer any questions.
Through you, Matthew, I'm a little bit uncomfortable with the town permitting Windmill Brewery to solicit donations. I understand that the town would do a receipt for it, but I don't know about that. I don't feel comfortable with that. And the other thing is, we don't have any figures of what it's going to cost the town. It says that we'll do road closures and stuff like that, but I always find it hard to when somebody comes and they say, the town will be in kind. Well, we don't know how much that costs, and I have a bit of a problem with that.
So So in terms of the road closure, we were going to close Dibble Street that day anyways, between, right beside the Leo Boyvick Community Center. So that's really the only area that we would see that would be closed. We already cordoned off an area for where the fireworks are set up so that the security is maintained there. And then last year, the fort asked that we help with kind of cordoning off some of the area at the fort because they were finding everyone was parking on the lawn. So those are things that we already do. And that's really why I suggested that any additional garbage, any site security, anything like this, not be the responsibility of the town, but be the responsibility of that third party. So really, I was only suggesting that we were going to undertake the things that we were going to do anyways in the course of the day, because we do have staff that kind of works through the activities at the Leo as well as into the evening to just make sure that the fireworks and parking goes on without a hitch and those sorts of things. So really that's where I was trying to separate those two, and it wouldn't, I think what I'm trying to attempt is that there would be no additional cost to the town. It would be the things that we would be doing that day anyways, whereas if there is an additional cost, that's where it should be part of that other third party.
Okay. See, I'm still not really comfortable with the asking for donations.
So in terms of the donation, it would be a letter signed by the town to say that, yes, it would be from Windmill Brewing, the town, that says, if you wish to donate towards, you would make the payment directly to the town. You wouldn't make it to Windmill Brewery or anything like that. It would all run through the town, to the town, and for the town. That way we have complete control, and only the amount that's raised, we would actually put towards enhancing that fireworks. So just a couple of things that we would want to provide in terms of controls so that we don't get the two mixed up.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Young and Councillor Kirkby.
Thank you, Mayor Shanker. Matthew, one of the things that I was thinking about is could the committee itself actually have a name, like Canada Day Committee or something to that effect? Because I appreciate that Windmill Brewery is trying to make everything bigger and better, but I don't want to see other businesses that may want to participate, not be able to. So I was considering possibly setting up a committee like Cardinal and actually call it the Canada Day Committee and to not make it exclusive to Windmill Brewery.
So the Cardinal Festival Committee is completely run by volunteers. It has nothing to do with the municipality. So as long as other volunteers want to come forward and do that, then sure, I think that's great. But as soon as we're going to say, put some stipulations around it, then it starts to become a municipal committee. And that's what I think I'm trying to avoid.
Good. Councillor Kirkby.
Through you, Mayor Shanker, I'm going to reiterate Councillor Lockett and Young's point that I'd rather have a different naming on it than the Windmill Brewery. And I just feel like it seems, it's tough for me to say that the Windmill Brewery, who's located not in the town of Prescott, right, is going to solicit on behalf of the town of Prescott, inside of Prescott, for an event that really is the town of Prescott's. I like the recommendation of Councillor Young that, it's no different to call it the Canada Day Committee is no different than calling it, in theory, the Windmill Brewery Committee for Canada Day. I don't like the private name on it. Myself, I'm not comfortable with it. I like the idea of doing it, but I don't like the idea of having it as a Windmill Brewery, even if it's their idea, right? They can still be represented at the event, right? Because they are doing the legwork. But speaking for myself, I've had a little group, right? The Row, but we weren't a group that was trying to make money or solicit business, really, versus running events. So I'm going to have to side with Councillor Lockett and Young on the, not in favor of the Windmill Brewery name being used for this committee group.
Thank you. I got Council Britton, then Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. I look at it totally different. The report says George Cherney from the Windmill Brewery. It doesn't necessarily say that it's going to be called the Windmill Brewery Canada Day Festivals. I think these people want to come in and they want to provide a service for our residents. And we do not have the time, we do not have the resources for staffing to put on different events, constantly different events, because we already have an event going on that day for the kids and stuff. So this is just adding to our own event. I think if somebody wants to come in and put on a great event with little time, staff timing, is great. You know, it could say George Cherney and Sean Lucy. Right?
Perfect.
Right? So, I mean, Sean and his dad own the Windmill Brewery, so people feel comfortable if it's just George Cherney and Sean Lucy putting on the event. You know, a name is just a name. But they want to come in and put on this big event for our town, have at her. Let's get her going.
Thank you, Council Britton. Hold on. I got Deputy Mayor Campbell.
So last year, we had Canada Day. Can't remember where I was, obviously not here. So what is the embellishment that's happening? Did we have fireworks last year? Did we have little games for the kids run by the town? So what is the embellishment?
So, sorry, I think you may have been missing from the last meeting. So I'll just take a step back. So basically, George came in and said he would like to add complementary activities such as a food and beverage tent on Fort property, potentially some buskers throughout town, some entertainment, that sort of thing, that would go from kind of that midday up to the fireworks. Then to try and build on our own fireworks. So we allocate $9,500 for fireworks, which gets you give or take 10 minutes. If you wanted to add to that, then we could solicit donations, and as long as we collect them by a certain date, then hands can expand the show. And basically it's about $2,000 a minute. And so, you know, if you want to get to, $1,000 a minute. So if you want to get to the 15-minute mark, if you raise about $5,000, then we could get, and which is very similar to the show we did a couple of years ago coming out of COVID. We did about a 15-minute show. We added additional allocation to it, and that's kind of where that ended up. So I think that's what George's ideas were, is to create that. And what I'm suggesting is that I'm fully in favor of that, but make it kind of, it's the responsibility for it, the risk, the reward as a third party, as opposed to combining it with what the town's already doing. Because we will continue doing that whole family oriented part, the barbecue, and then the evening fireworks.
Okay. Go ahead.
Sorry, through you, Mayor Shankar. So then if Windmill Brewery wants to run the event and set it up, then they should run the event and sell advertising or advertising space to their event. Not donations through that we're going to issue tax receipts for.
And so that's why I would say anything to do with donation or tax receipts can be for the fireworks only and not associated with their event. So that's where I would draw the line, is that if we're looking at sponsorships, looking at advertising, all of that, make it part of that third party event, that standalone event, which is complementary to ours, but really has nothing to do. And the only reason why I'm saying, you know, us for the fireworks, because that way we're already have our fireworks contract and all everything like that. So it just makes sense if we're going to add on to that, then we'd be able to do so. Without having a whole nother vendor and complications that way. So that's really where I see is anything to do that's beyond what the town is doing would be done by the third party. They can go about creating their model for it any way they choose.
So they will solicit as Windmill Brewery to donate to our firework display. Is that correct?
Potentially.
Oh, sorry.
So that's really my whole issue. If a third-party person wants to come in, great, I agree, have at it. But don't involve the town, because now the town's supporting a business. And I think I have a problem with a business coming to other businesses asking for money.
Okay.
That's my whole issue.
And I have no issue with that. I just tried to work in the fireworks component, but to be perfectly honest, we're happy with it being completely arm's length, just in the same way that Cardinal is completely arm's length from the municipality. And so for us, nice and clean, no risk, no concern that, if it's rainy that day, that there's not going to be sales. I don't think we should be in the business of refreshments and beverages, that sort of thing for that day. So again, if it's third party, then that's fantastic.
Anyone else? Okay, so having said all that.
So if I paraphrase, we're going to completely separate the fireworks. We're not going to deal with fireworks. That's a separate thing. If that group wants to make a donation towards fireworks, that's fine. It's not on behalf of the town, and we are not issuing donation receipts. Everything else is third party, their responsibility. We'll work with them to create the connection with the fort and that sort of thing. But that's really where our involvement ends.
Comfortable with that.
Councilor McConnell?
Thank you, Mayor Shanker. I really didn't have anything to contribute here, but you brought something up. Don't we usually do hot dogs or something like that? So you said we're not going to have anything to do with food. So obviously we are.
Sorry.
As we always have.
Yes. So okay. Third party or a separate refreshment and food tent. We're just doing our barbecue, family orientation, that sort of thing that we've done in the past.
Okay, so what about permits? Anybody coming into town that doesn't have a business in town has to have a permit to operate. If you have a food truck coming into town, are we going to waive those fees or what?
That really is up to the fort and what they allow on their property and they don't. Those are ever changing, and so I don't want to speak before the fort has an opportunity to weigh in on what that looks like. But certainly if there's that kind of concept, then we'll take a look and see what's appropriate.
And buskers, if I may, do you need a permit to be a busker?
I can't remember. I think there may be. It's something that we're currently looking at in the licensing bylaw. If there is kind of an overall event that they're coming forward with, then we would expect kind of a list of everything that they require. And then we bring back that to council to make sure that you're comfortable with those decisions.
Thank you.
Through you, Mayor Shanker, it's a lot tonight. But I just want to wrap this up with saying that I 100% support working with the Windmill Brewery, right, to make this day a success and doing what we can, and if there's some in kind and all that stuff. But it was just the part of soliciting donations on behalf of the town where I had a tough time. And I think that's the general feeling amongst the room here. And so I just want to make sure that I'm clear that, us working with the Windmill Brewery to make this day successful for the town residents and them is a priority.
Yeah. And I agree with the room. I just know that we've been pushing hard to get community partners and community volunteers. Maybe they're not exactly in town, but we've always talked about not really having borders either, so if they want to come into town and help us out and we can, without making them the big cheese, so to speak, let's do it, But can the motion we have, do we have to make any changes to the motion?
So through you, Mayor Shanker, the motion just reads that council directs staff to work with George Tierney and Windmill Brewery to coordinate complimentary activities for candidate July 1st, 2023. So I believe based on the discussion, Matthew seemed to outline a clear path forward and how council wanted to move. So I I think council still wants staff to work with Georgetown and Windmill Brewery, so the motion, I believe, is, as long as if council wishes to change it, you can. But if you think that.
I think we've given direction to Matthew and Matthew understands that. Yep. Somewhat. Are we good with that? Can I call the question? All in favor? Great. Thank you. Good job. That's it for staff reports. So we're moving on. There's no resolutions tonight. And there is one item under bylaws. Motion reads that bylaw 19-2023 being a bylaw to adopt a community improvement plan for the corporation of the town of Prescott be read and passed, signed by the mayor and clerk and sealed by the city corporation. Can I have a motion and a seconder, please? Councillor Kirkby, Councillor Young. Any further discussion on that bylaw? All in favor? Thank you. Opposed? Carried, thank you. No new businesses, no notices of motion. I do have 2 proclamations today. Okay, 17.1 is a proclamation for National Day for Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women, Girls, Two-Spirit People on May 5th, 2023. So I'm going to read it. Whereas in Canada, May 5th marks the National Day of Awareness for Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women, Girls, and Two-Spirit People, in brackets MMIWG2S. And whereas this day coincides with Red Dress Day, which was inspired by an art project by Jamie Black, a Metis woman who used empty red dresses to evoke the missing women and girls. And whereas on Red Dress Day, people are encouraged to wear red or display red clothing to honor and remember missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit family and friends. And whereas First Nations women continue to experience staggering rates of violence as well as ongoing oppression and sex discrimination. And whereas Indigenous women and girls have the right to be safe in their communities wherever they live. And whereas on National Day of Awareness for Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women, Girls, Two-Spirited People, we remember the Indigenous people we have lost to murder and those who remain missing and are committed to working to ensure any instance of a missing or murdered person is met with swift and effective action. Therefore, the Council of the Corporation of the Town of Prescott does hereby proclaim May 5th, 2023 as National Day of Awareness for Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women, Girls, Two-Spirit People throughout the town of Prescott. Dated today, first day of May 2023. We have 2 proclamations this week. Item 17.2 is a proclamation for Emergency Preparedness Week, May 7 to 13, 2023. Whereas the town of Prescott recognizes the importance of emergency management in Ontario, and whereas the goal of Emergency Preparedness Week is to raise community awareness and the need to be prepared for the possibility of an emergency, and whereas the safety of our community is the responsibility of each and every one of us, we must prepare now and learn how to secure a strong and healthy tomorrow. Therefore, the Council of the Corporation of the Town of Prescott does hereby proclaim the week of May 7 to 13, 2023 as Emergency Preparedness Week in the Town of Prescott, dated today, first day of May 2023. Yes, sir.
You indicated that there was no new business. Usually ask, does anybody have any new business?
Okay.
Quite frankly, I didn't at the time, but the first proclamation you read jogged my memory of something that I've been needing to bring up for some time, and by the time we get to this time of the day, I usually about to drift off and forget about it. But it's the Indigenous thing which jogged my memory. Our flagpole down at the marina, we fly 5 flags on it, and traditionally have flown 5 flags on it. And what we fly is the Canadian flag traditionally. Ontario flag, the Prescott flag, and because of our proximity to the US, we fly the US flag. And because of the number of Quebecers in our marina in the summer, we, out of respect, fly the Quebec flag. The last few years, because of the Indigenous issue, we've been flying two Indigenous flags there. So we're missing two flags, and the two flags that we are currently missing is the Ontario flag, which is not right, and the Prescott flag, which I don't think is right either. Now, we do have the Prescott flag flying outside on that little rinky-dink flagpole we bought a few years ago. I don't think that's appropriate. I'd like to see us go back to flying the 5 flags we traditionally fly at the marina, while still giving respect to the Indigenous people. And certainly not this month, but every once in a while, a month is proclaimed or a week is proclaimed, and we are supplied, or we already have a flag for that issue. Gay Pride is one example, Heart Fund is another. What I would like to see us do is give direction to council to bring us back the cost of adding 2 new spots on the end of that crossbar, so we can fly the 2 flags that we're not flying now, and we will have space to fly something like the Gay Pride flag or Cancer Society flag or whatever happens to come along. With respect to our province and our town, that is the main flagpole that we see when you're coming down Edward Street. And I would like us to give direction to staff to look into that cost. Thank you.
You got that, Matthew? Mm-hmm. So you want 2 more poles down there?
No, we have a large pole with a cross piece.
Yeah.
And it flies 2 on either side and the Canadian flag in the center. I would like 2 added on to either end. So we can fly the provincial flag, our flag, and then we would have 2 spares for something else that came along on a monthly basis, like I said, Gay Pride or whatever. Thank you.
That's doable.
Yep, we'll come back with a report.
Thank you. Any other new business? Okay, Matthew, is anyone online?
No.
No meeting. So we're going to move to closed session. I have a motion that reads that council move into closed session at 8:12 p.m. to discuss matters pertaining to 19.1 litigation under section 239 2E of the Municipal Act, litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality. Also 19.2 purchase and sale under same section 239 2C of the Municipal Act, a proposed or pending disposition of land by the municipality. 19.3 is approval of closed minutes from April 17th, and 19.4 is an identifiable individual under section 239 2B of the Municipal Act, personal matters about an identifiable individual, including a municipal employee. And that the Economic Development Officer remain in the room for items 19.1 and 19.2, and that the CAO, Treasurer, Clerk, and Deputy Clerk remain in the room for items 19.1, 19.2, 19.3, and 19.4. Where are you going, Nate?
If we could just remove the deputy clerk from the closed session, she's gonna head home.
Oh, I don't know. All right, we can do that. Can I get a mover and a seconder? Councillor Walken, Councillor Crispy, all in favor? Good, thank you. We'll take a 5-minute break.